The first meetings were held at Gould Academy in Bethel, Maine. Founders of the National Training Lab had important connections with the Office of Strategic Services, World War II forerunner to the CIA. And a 1962 book published by the National Training Labs and the NEA entitled 5 Issues in Training addressed the process of unfreezing, changing, and refreezing attitudes in order to bring about change by stating the following, quote, "The Chinese communists would remove the target person from those situations and social relationships which tended to confirm and reinforce the validity of the old attitudes." Now don't forget, teachers from all over and everybody goes to, they have these sessions elsewhere now as well. It goes on to say that people come from all over the world to go there, but quote, "From the New Britain workshop dialogues of the founders emerged the notions of action research lab and change agent." I went through the training myself to become a change agent, at which I was taught how to identify all of you, which is me too, identify myself. Identify the resistors in your community. That's what got me on my white horse. When I was taught how to identify myself, I decided something's wrong in America. So anyway, now they say that those labels, change agent, were terms coined to denote a very vigorous, proactive, social change kind of posture, emerging of radical education, deviant behavioral science, and humanistic democracy. Now don't forget, that's very important, okay? Now, all these things are in my book, so if you buy the book, you know you're going to get it. But I want to read this from Bertrand Russell, 1951, Impact of Science Upon Society. And he says here, and this has all happened, he's really onto it. Brilliant, huh? As much as we may dislike him. "Education should aim at destroying free will, so that after pupils are thus schooled, they will be incapable throughout the rest of their lives of thinking or acting otherwise than as their schoolmasters would have wished. Influences of the home are obstructive, and in order to condition students, verses set to music and repeatedly intoned are very effective. It is for a future scientist to make these maxims precise and discover exactly how much it costs per head to make children believe that snow is black. When the technique has been perfected, every government that has been in charge of education for more than one generation will be able to control its subjects securely without the need of armies or policemen." Now, that's a great quote. I'm sure many of you have heard it. But we will go on, and just to prove that he wasn't the only one. Now, John Goodlad is a major change agent. You probably never heard of him. I found his box in the U.S. Department of Ed, which was the restructuring, total restructuring of American education, putting in the UN's lifelong learning system, birth through death, all of us underneath the umbrella of the school district, all the services run through the school. I found all of this. 4 books were published that came out of it, but I will just give you what he had to say in 1968 in today's education. I used to have nightmares about John Goodlad. Ask my husband. "The most controversial issues of the 21st century will pertain to the ends and means of modifying human behavior and who shall determine them. The first educational question will not be what knowledge is of the most worth, but what kind of human beings do we wish to produce? The possibilities virtually defy our imagination." Now, that is Edward Hunter, who wrote Brainwashing in Red China, went to a friend of mine, a wonderful woman in Maryland, who worked against all the changes in education in the late 60s in Montgomery County. They were exposing what they were doing. They had timeout boxes. They had all this conditioning, everything going on that I've been talking about today. That's in here. And he went to her house because he was living there. And he didn't identify himself. And he said, "I really would like to see what you're talking about." And she gave him this box of stuff. He went off, came back, and he said, "Mrs. Lawrence," because Edward Hunter understood the Chinese communist brainwashing, "this is Chinese communist brainwashing." And so you've got to understand that. You have to understand that we signed the agreements with the Soviet Union, Ronald Reagan in 1985, which virtually merged the two systems. Very recently, Margaret Spellings, she's so happy, she's come up with the agreement with the Soviets. Just here it is, last couple of months ago. Very happy about it. Here we are. By the way, computers aren't working. The reports coming out of the Department of Ed show that the computers are a total disaster. I got fired because I leaked the first massive grant that I found on putting computers in, and I didn't want computers in there. I knew that they're very dangerous for the reasons brainwashing, but also don't teach academics. Now the department's admitting they don't work, but they had to get them in there because it's necessary for school to work. Now, this is the last thing I'm going to say, because you may not think that Ronald Reagan's agreement had anything to do with what's going on. Moscow Declaration adopted by the G8 education ministers. Secretary Spellings commits U.S. education, U.S. Incorporating Russian education initiatives, the Moscow Declaration was accepted June 2nd, 2006 by the education ministers of the Group of 8. The U.S. Department of Ed explained that the joint declaration is to confirm G8 member commitment to cooperation in education at all levels in the 21st century. And then it gives the Russia's official news agency declaration says, well, it goes on and on and on. And that's the end. Now, I'm talking because this, you have to get into the Reese Committee Foundation, tax-exempt foundations, 3,000 pages at AmericanDeception.com. There you're going to see the proof of what they were up to, and also, as all of you know, Norman Dodd, who was the research director for the Reese Committee, I knew him personally, was told by the president of the Ford Foundation that they got their instructions from the White House, and those instructions were to use their money to change America so it could be successfully merged with the Soviet Union. Now, that's happened. You may say that the Cold War was the biggest phony thing that ever happened. Totally phony. You can tell me I'm crazy. I'm not. I know what I thought. Read from Major Jordan's diaries if you want to check that one out. Write it down. You can get it on the internet. From Major Jordan's diaries. I'm going to say goodbye with that one because our problem, it is Hitler they're putting in. There's no question about that. But they want you to think that because the left has always been opposed to Hitler, right? So that's what they want you. Don't fall for it. Don't fall for it that it's just Hitler. It's the communist system. George Bush, I wrote an article, walks like a duck, talks like a duck. Every single thing that is going in education, the communitarian agenda, the method Pavlov, you name it, it's the Communist Manifesto. Read 1932, William Foster's book, Toward a Soviet America. That's it. Read it. That's it. And thank you all very much. And thank you, Pastor Butch.